Minister, thank you for your time. We'll get into the detail of the Prime Minister's speech, but just on the point of this ensuring integrity legislation, the Prime Minister today said he'll put that to one side while you go through this quite rigorous and short time frame roundtable process. The PM said, however, and I'll quote him, "We are committed to ensuring that this meaning lawful behaviour happens in the simplest, fairest and most effective statutory form possible, which we will consider going forward." Now, what's statutory form mean? What does he mean by that?
Well, I think the PM's point was in the context of the fact that he believes people need to lay down arms so that we can have a cooperative, consultative approach to a range of known problems that are holding back job growth. And we are the first and major party to lay down those arms, and he said very clearly that there won't be a vote on the Ensuring Integrity Bill in the Senate. That bill, I think quite properly, was designed to apply right across the union movement and prevent the sort of unlawful behaviour that we've seen, particularly inside the construction industry. The PM also noted that as a matter of principle, we won't tolerate the type of rampant unlawfulness we've seen from the CFMEU in the construction industry. And that, I think, Peter, particularly would be very damaging to Australia's economic recovery if it were to continue, because construction is going to be so important to our economic recovery. And the PM stated clearly that we will look at the simplest, clearest, fairest way to deal with that unlawfulness on construction sites.
Well, you had a good response from the union leader, Sally McManus, today. I think you got certainly plenty of comfort from business that they'll at least engage in the process. But Labor was quick to call JobMaker job faker. Now, you can have all the consensus you like, but business and unions in the end don't have a vote in the parliament. How do you plan to get Labor to take this reform push seriously?
Well, it's enormously disappointing that they've chosen straight off the bat not to take a constructive approach, but I'll leave that for them to explain to the Australian people. What we think is that there are known problems inside the industrial relations system that are holding back job growth, productivity growth, economic growth at the time when we need it most. So we've identified 5 groupings of those issues, and the task is to try and generate a product. Now, it may be that in some of those working groups we can't generate a product that unifies and creates agreement around a final product. In other working groups we may be able to do that. But even where a final product can't be agreed on, the government obviously reserves the position to take a solution to a known problem into Parliament. But ultimately, if you've exposed the solution and the generation and the production of that solution to this type of process, short, sharp, albeit that it will be, you probably, I would guess, are going to have a stronger product in terms of trying to be able to divine a path through Parliament, and particularly with the crossbench in the Senate. So nothing can be lost from a period of good faith negotiation, cooperation and consultation around trying to find solution to known problems. And if Labor want to, kick that into the long grass within 2 seconds of the whistle being blown, I think that's disappointing.
Well, talk to me about casual workers too. We had that federal court decision last week. Casual workers who already get a loading in lieu of entitlements like annual leave, sick leave and others, they'll now get that and the loading. Now, you said last week the decision has immediate practical implications for the bottom line of many Australian businesses. I know they agree with you. I've spoken to them on this show. You indicated that if there was an appeal, you were going to consult, of course, but if there was an appeal, you were open for the Commonwealth to be involved. Now, is this going to be something you continue with, or will it move to the roundtable phase?
Well, the legal process will run parallel to our roundtable phase, but of course, on the issue of the definition of casual, which was never defined in the Fair Work Act and has caused enormous confusion, on the issue of the extent to which the ability to be paid twice, once in the loading and then once if you were mischaracterised for the leave that you should have got, are clearly going to be issues that we need to resolve in the working group that deals around permanency of employment, the casual definition of employment. And you know what? Whether you're an employer or an employee, you both suffer from the fact that there's enormous confusion because the term was never defined in the Fair Work Act and has come to be defined and redefined through a court process. And everyone will benefit if we can drive certainty into that definition and into the very marketplace that generates employment. So it makes sense, I think, to talk to the people who are affected, both employers and employees, and see if we can construct some kind of working definition and some kind of process so that people know the basic tenets of what is a casual employee and what is not, when someone is a casual employee and when they are not, and what their remuneration is as between casual and permanency. And if we can get some basic construct and agreement around that, then that will, of course, remove a major barrier to job growth.
Just quickly before I go into another issue, if a business goes to the wall because they can't pay this back pay, if this decision stands as sort of a whole of economy-wide decision on casual workers, if the business goes belly up and then the casuals have now all these new loadings and entitlements coming their way, does the Commonwealth Gears scheme, or whatever it's called now, the Commonwealth Entitlement Scheme, does the taxpayer then have to foot the bill here?
You're talking about the FEG, the Fair Entitlements Guarantee. When Australian companies fail, if they have put themselves in a position where they're not able to pay entitlements, then the Commonwealth has a liability there. But in answer to your question, I think the first point is we don't want to see businesses fail unnecessarily because a class action is brought against them. To pay a group of employees both the loading that they received as a casual, and if they were mischaracterised in their employment, the additional benefits without being able to offset that amount. I mean, that would be
no, I understand
a terrible
that,
result.
But if they fail, I understand that, but if they do fail, if businesses go to the wall and they then can't pay these entitlements as the court decision stands, does the federal taxpayer have to pick them up?
Well, potentially, but we want to try and negotiate an outcome where we ensure that the businesses don't fail. I mean, imagine being in the greatest economic challenge that Australia's ever been in, getting a federal court decision that says that where an employee was mischaracterised in their employment, you can't even offset the loading you paid them in lieu of sick leave.
I know.
When you have to pay their sick leave. I mean, we have to
extraordinary decision. Extraordinary decision.
Yeah, and so let's sit down and fix it.
All right. I've got to ask you about Belton Road. You are the Attorney General. This is, not your IR hat. This is the other one, just as important.
Sure.
How is it that a state can sign up with another nation state, another country, an agreement that the national government here in Australia have advised them not to go ahead with?
Well, I guess the question is more should rather than how. I mean, it's been done. I think there were some wise experienced comments made by Colin Barnett, whom I used to work for in state politics as Premier, about this. But that's something that the state government's done. Certainly, I think that the federal government's view is that having consciously made a decision not to sign on to that initiative, that is a decision that should be reflected consistently across all jurisdictions. But nevertheless, the Victorian government has formed an alternative view.
Did Victoria get a briefing from your intelligence and security agencies in Canberra?
Well, I'm sure that there would be briefings about the general prospect of that occurring. I mean, that's something that you'd need really to direct to the Victorian Premier.
Did you offer briefings, though, Minister?
Well, look, I don't offer those briefings. I don't have line agency control in Foreign Affairs or ASIO. I have oversight and integrity control of ASIO, so I just can't answer that question for you.
So there's nothing at a Commonwealth level that you could do or the Prime Minister could do in order to stop this agreement going ahead at your level?
Well, I don't know whether that question was ever investigated in a legal sense and what type of forewarning there was. Again, I can't give you general advice as to that, but we would obviously prefer that state governments stick to their patch, that the federal government controls in a consistent way the foreign position in foreign matters of the Commonwealth of Australia. I think that it's not a particularly fortunate outcome that's been engaged in. I think Colin Barnett's comments are very true. It probably represents a state government treading into the space that isn't theirs, but these things happen from time to time.
All right, talk to me about this brouhaha with state borders too. A lot of people are saying that you're to blame, and this was the words of the Deputy Opposition Leader today, that some of the PM's to blame for the border closures. That's not how it works. Why are they closed? We know we are told it's health advice. What can be done about opening those borders up? And what's the likelihood, do you think, of a constitutional challenge by people like Pauline Hanson?
Yeah, well, the opposition has never been more opposite than what they're being at the moment. I mean, blaming the Prime Minister for the closure of state borders, that is novel, I've got to say. But that is a decision, clearly, that's been made by state premiers. There are constitutional issues that feed into it. health issues, and I think predominantly economic issues. So in my own state of Western Australia, I would hate to see our state's tourism, retail, hospitality industry miss out because we kept borders closed for longer than they needed to be closed. And I guess a lot of people in Queensland feel precisely the same way, and those two states will be competing against each other for Australian tourists who might otherwise have gone overseas, will be looking for somewhere to go and spend their hard-earned money in Australia. So there's obviously a balance to strike here. Premiers are making their own determination about that balance. I think that's something that would have to be reassessed on an almost daily basis. And there are staged ways to look at this as well. I mean, look, South Australia and West Australia have both got low cases of COVID-19, and yet the border is closed between the two jurisdictions. And that doesn't make a whole lot of sense at this point in time.
No, we'll watch it all very closely, Minister. Thank you for your time and good luck for the months ahead with your increased workload.
Pleasure. Good to be busy.